Hi, I'm Doug here at Global West, and today I'd like to take a second and talk to you about what we're doing on this particular frame. Now, this happens to be a 1962 Impala frame, and our particular client wanted us to go ahead and get it set up for powder coat and install all of our products from front to rear. Well, in that particular process, we go ahead and take the frame all the way down. As you can see, he dropped it off to us. We sandblasted it. We buffed all the welds because the factory welds are not that good. Cleaned this all up, squared the chassis, and now re-welded the entire frame. This is the type of work that we do, especially on these older frames, because they need a lot of help in reference to chassis stiffening. Now, one of the things you may notice is we've already gone ahead and put in our W5864 kit. Now, what that is that opens the hole up in the shock. There's a video on how to do that. Normally there's a 3/8 hole here. The shock stud is a 3/8 shaft. And you don't want that because when you have the shock bolted in and the lower control arm has to pivot up and down, there's leverage right here. Well, if the shock can't move at the top or tilt, that load goes into the shock body, and that's something that we don't want to do. So what you want to do is you want to drill this out at the top, and we go ahead and put a couple of concave washers up here, one on the top, one underneath it. It's welded in. And when you put the shock in now with the shock cushions, it allows that pivot and takes the load off the shock. That particular kit is a W5864. And as we move on back here, you'll be able to see all the welding and work we've done. But one of the other things we want to do is we want to put our TS-84L&R brace. Now, these particular braces go in this area right here. The reason why we put a brace in here is when you have high horsepower, there's a lot of load that goes through here. These have a tendency to pull out. This will rip right out. So what we want to do is we want to reinforce this cross member right here, and we do that with these particular braces. These braces are going to go into this position right here, and if you'll notice, this lines right directly up with the existing holes. Now, this all bolts together with welding, and you can, once you get it in position, go ahead and weld this area here. It depends upon if you have enough room on your car with the body on it. Generally, you do. There's a divot in the frame right here that's just like the other side, and the way we've got this set up, it pretty much sits exactly where it's supposed to go, and you can pile it off this, but we're going to give you that measurement. When you go to do an extra upper arm, you know, you've got the bracket that goes on this side, which is what sets the pinion angle. From the factory, it doesn't really look like this. It doesn't have the multi-holes, but it bolts on this other side, and you have these large shims that the factory used to set your pinion angle. If you go with our system, you eliminate all that, and then we have these brackets that take the place of the factory one. If you'll notice, there's holes on it. This is a VTC94. When you adjust the upper control arm in these different hole positions, you change your anti-squat. And this is beneficial for a drag racing environment or handling. It depends on what you're doing. But that's why we put these holes in here. And also if you're playing around with ride heights, we have a coilover system for the back, and these holes will come into play on how traction's applied based off your ride height. And again, it's based off the instantaneous center, which all affects your anti-squat. So, this kit here, if you'll notice the 3 holes here, is going to match up to our supports. You're going to have 2 of these, one on each side at the end of the day. When this goes up into here and it's positioned, this hole here, the distance from here over to here, that number is going to be 11 7/8. Center line to center line. If you were to take a measurement from this edge to the edge of the other one, that number, 10.5. Those 2 measurements will get you squared up in the back to allow these to go on the other side. That gets this into a 4-link. So the upper control arms, if you do this, is going to be a parallel link. The TBC97 is a part number that you would use for the upper control arms. They will both be adjustable. And if you wanted the extra bracket that goes onto the differential, that is a VTC95. And that'll have the bracket for the diff, and it'll have one of these with it. And this, like I said, by itself is a VTC94. So let us go ahead, and we'll have our guys go ahead and take care of this. So now you got a good idea how to install our TS-84R&L braces. And remember those measurements. You've got 11 7/8 center line to center line, and you got 10.5 across here. What we want to talk about now is the panhard rod. There's this bracket, which you see right here, and you'll notice the multiple hole locations. This right here, this top one, is actually the factory location. These down here are the new locations that we've incorporated into this bracket. This is the adjustable panhard rod. This would be attached to the frame where the Zerk fitting would go down for grease. And of course on this end you've got the adjustable rod end, so you can center the differential in the car. Now when you raise and lower the vehicle, this panhard rod will change angles. So it could be sitting in like this, or if the car is really low it'll be like this. Whatever the case is, what you want is when you have your ride height set, you want this to be as close to parallel to ground as you possibly can. Because if it's like this and the suspension is moving up and down, this arc right here is pushing and pulling the differential in and out. And that's where you get weird handling in the back, instability, because the rear end is actually shifting on you. When you have it in the center, parallel to ground, we're on the null of the arc. Very little movement that way, and the car becomes much more stable. So by going to this bracket and installing this on the frame, it's going to give us a better shot at getting that panhard rod parallel to ground after you set your ride height. We have 3 different kits. Now we're talking about the bracket for the panhard rod. This is the bracket you would get, which we were talking about for changing the height of the panhard rod. This can be purchased separately. You may already have an aftermarket panhard rod that's adjustable, and it can even go into a stock application. I wouldn't advise that, using a stock panhard rod, because you're limited on any adjustment whatsoever for centering the rear end. I really wouldn't want to do that. But this will go to anything you have that'll fit in a stock application. Let's just put it that way. So this part number, just so you know, PHC84BKT. Comes with your hardware, and you're also going to have a back plate. It's going to go over here. The panhard rod, and this is the adjustable like we were talking about, this is going to be a PHC84. That's this by itself. No brackets, nothing else. This will go on the stock location, but it does adjust lateral for the differential to center it. If you ordered a PHC84K, referring to kit, you're going to get all the parts. You're going to get the panhard rod, the bracket plates, all of that. It's a complete kit. The way this goes on is this here is going to go in the stock location, and we give you a little pin right here that goes in between. And this here, when you install this, it's going to go through the factory mount right here, and it's going to keep it separated. And so you can tighten this down with this separated. When this goes in, this here just lines up on your factory brace. You just make it level, and you'll notice that once you get at this position, you're going to weld this to this on the back side over here, away from the gas tank. And then this plate is going to be a backing plate on the back side. That's all there is to it. And the panhard rod will go in here and go to your differential. So let's go ahead and we'll install this on the frame. You can see how that process goes. And then we want to talk about one more thing. Now you get a good idea how easy it is to install the panhard rod bracket. Now one of the things we want to talk about on modifying this frame or in reinforcing this frame are panels that we're going to use in the back section here on this frame. It is all open through here. And by putting some panels in here, 3/16 material, and welding these in, we've now boxed this section and made it a lot stronger. And the reason why we want to reinforce this particular area is because it just stiffens the entire chassis up overall. Back in the day, they used to have bumper floor jacks. And the interesting thing is with a bumper floor jack, I don't know if you've even seen those before, is where it attaches and it hooks into the bumper, and that's how you used to lift the vehicle up to change your tire if you had a flat. Well, this particular area took a lot of load. Reinforcing this area was always a proper thing to do. Of course, nowadays we generally aren't going to do that. We have a different style of jack that we're going to use. But I wanted to bring this out, that we went ahead and did this anyway, but I also want to show you the differences between a US frame and a Canada frame. Now we flipped the frame over from prior, and now you can see the bottom. And this area right here will be the dead giveaway, or one of the dead giveaways between the two. This frame was put together with two halves. It's put together like this, and then it's welded. You can see the seam all the way along here. On a Canadian frame, that particular region there's no welds. It's stamped and it's rolled, which gives the frame more strength and structure. So look at this particular area here. If you've got the seam, you've got a US frame. If you don't, and you see how the actual frame rail is formed, that'll be a Canadian frame, and that's the better frame to have. Another location. This is where the lower control arms bolt on. Now if you'll notice right over here, there's only one bolt hole for the lower control arm to attach. But on a Canadian frame, there are two. And there's an advantage to that because now you can change your anti-squat in the rear. Or when you're playing around with your ride heights and what have you, and you get something specific that you like, that's a big plus right there, having two bolt holes. And there's one other location. All the way to the back here, where you've seen us putting in these panels to reinforce this back area, on a Canadian frame, there's no panels to put in. It is already done properly all the way through. Those three areas are a real quick way of determining where that frame came from. And hopefully, you got a Canadian frame. If you like this video, you may want to check out part 2 when we get the frame back from powder coat and go ahead and assemble it. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in other videos that we may do or other products that we may have, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Instagram. Thanks again.